to a Zoom.
Well, everyone will just call their product.
He is still trying to get in. I don't know if you want to go ahead.
one, and we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first ever City of Sonoma meeting online. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order on Monday, April 13th for a special meeting of the Sonoma City Council. I guess we'll start off. So just to start off, this is our first virtual meeting, so we appreciate everyone's patience as we navigate this new situation. I've lost the thing because we've gone to share screen. Wait, hold on. Apologies. How did that happen? Did I share my screen? No. Rebecca, did you share? Did somebody hit share screen? Because now I see everybody. I lost my the script.
So minimize.
There we go. Okay. First virtual meeting, so there's going to be some glitches. Already have been one. There's been some situations where meetings have been hacked or Zoom bombed. We've taken all possible efforts to make sure that this doesn't happen. But of course, there are some clever people out there that may be able to get in. In the event that it does happen, we will stop the stream and the TV broadcast immediately. We will remain in the meeting and we will pause the meeting. And then we will try to rebuild and restart the stream. If it's not possible to reinitiate the stream, the meeting will end and all matters that have not been considered will be postponed to a later date. Each member of the City Council will be participating in the meeting from their home or office. They'll have families, they have friends, they have pets, they have roommates. And in order to be respectful of their private spaces, council members may turn off their video if they so choose to, but they are still listening and participating. If a council member leaves the meeting, they will let the mayor or the city clerk know, and that will be noted. Public comment is going to be happening in a different way. Obviously, we can't bring you all into a room as we normally do. So public comment will only be accepted via email at publiccomment@sonomacity.org. So just send an email to publiccomment, one word, @sonomacity.org. Public comment can be submitted at any time. However, in order to be read into the record during the meeting, it must be submitted after the mayor calls the meeting to order. So anytime between now and prior to the close of the public comment period during the item topic. So because it's a special meeting, we're not going to have a general public comment. And you can send the one item we have regular calendar item 3.1 and the consent calendar. Any item that you want to talk about or you want to make public comment on, please send the email between now and when the item comes up, and then we'll have it read. It will be read into the record with a maximum allowance of 2 minutes per individual comment or subject to the mayor's discretion. Please include the item number that is being referenced in the subject line, and only one email per item can be submitted by each member of the public. That's where we're going to go with that. So, Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind, we're going to go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance now. We've got a picture of the flag that we're going to post, and we can all pledge allegiance to the flag. And I guess I'll just go ahead and lead it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Did I do it right? I think I got it. All right. Great. Beautiful. Now on to this is weird that it's such a big screen. Oh, here we go. Exit full screen. There's the key. Great. Now we're going to go on to item 3.1, update this on the city's Emergency Operations Center response to COVID-19 and give some future direction to staff. So City Manager Kathy Capriola, if you'd like to take this over, I'd appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Harvey, members of the council, members of the community. If I could ask the city clerk's office to put up the PowerPoint and share the screen, that would be great. So good evening. The purpose of tonight's presentation is to give an update about the work that's been going since about a month ago when the council last met. And joining me tonight are a couple other staff that are here to answer questions and some other members of our community. Wayne Wyrick, our plans chief, who's our development services coordinator in real life, and then Sue Casey, who's working on all of our continued business operations and finance and HR. And Sue's our assistant city manager. I'm also pleased to have with us again tonight with the Sonoma Valley Hospital, Kelly Mather, who's the CEO, and Dr. Sabrina Kidd, who's their chief medical officer, to give a little update about the hospital and what they've been doing for the last month and their good progress. And then Mark Bodenhammer, who's working collaboratively as the CEO of the chamber and working with the Sonoma Valley Vintners and Growers and the Sonoma Valley Business Bureau. And he'll give an update about the business community. We can turn to the next slide, please. So I had to put this calendar together, honestly. As you all know, it's kind of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Days are blending, and it has gone so fast. Kind of our world going upside down and national and throughout the world. So just a few, in March, in the first week, we had a number of declarations of emergency, and then we declared on the 12th. And the council ratified that on the 16th. And then really when things really started to shift was on the 13th of March, 17th of March, when the Sonoma Public Health Officer put her shelter in place order. And initially that was through April 7th. And then Governor Newsom, 2 days later, put that in place, put a shelter in place for the entire, for the entire state. And then on the 23rd of March, the Sonoma Public Health Officer closed all the parks, both county parks, state parks, and municipal parks, as a way to try to contain and limit exposure to the virus. And then on the 31st, the Sonoma Public Health Officer extended the shelter in place, and right now it's extended through May 3rd. So we're now partly through April, but those were some of the key things that have occurred and started us on this journey. I'm going to turn go to the next slide and ask Wayne Wyrick, just who's been kind of following the data and plans and all this, and ask Wayne to speak to these two items.
Yeah, so we've been kind of following the progress of how this virus has been proceeding both in California, locally in this region, as well as Sonoma County, and drilling down right to the city of Sonoma. So as you can see, the 7-day average is beginning to trend downward for the state of California in terms of new cases reported. Now, I just would caution you, as the governor and everybody that does any kind of press conference on this, I would caution you that these numbers are based on the testing that's being done now, and I don't think nobody thinks we're doing enough testing to really get good data. But as you can see, the trend is heading downward, at least over the last few days, and that's a good sign.
Next slide, please.
And just a little more locally, in Sonoma County, you can see over the last 4 days that the cases have been down. The high case rate on April 8th of 16 was, I think, one of the highest that we had in the county. But I think the key is that when you look at the active cases, they're staying relatively steady. And those numbers go up and down based on the new reported cases minus the newly recovered cases. And so we'll see it's been relatively flat over certainly the last 5 days. And if you look at the graph to the left, the total cases by date, the red pieces are the new cases that are, or the active cases that are ongoing. And you can just see that over the last many days that it's been relatively flat. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about the graphs or where we are right now. Okay, thanks.
We have questions from council on that? Seeing none, go ahead.
So next slide then. I'd like to introduce Kelly Mather, CEO of the hospital, and Dr. Sabrina Kidd, and also turn it over to Kelly, and just want to again extend my appreciation, the partnership that we've been building with the hospital, and just the collaboration also with the Sonoma Valley community health clinic has really been exemplary. So with that, I'll turn it to Kelly for an update from our local public health officials.
Great, thank you. So again, thank you for having us, and it's good to come this week. Kathy and I were just talking earlier today. This time last week, we were waiting for the peak to happen, and today we feel pretty confident that we've at least made it through a peak, if not the peak. So that's positive. Where we are with the hospital is we've been doing drive-through testing. I think that's changed since we last spoke, and that's going very well. So what happens is if someone has a concern, they can either go to their primary care physician and get an order and get tested the next day, or they can call our hotline, talk to a nurse. If the nurse thinks they need to be tested, they can go through and get tested in our drive-through, which is the old emergency department. We were doing quite a few appointments, and they have actually tapered off a little bit, and the calls to the hotline have also tapered off in the last week. So again, we've done 140 tests at the hospital, and 10 have been positive. This is in line with the amount of positive that we're seeing in the county and really across the state. When you get to the bigger numbers, it's about 4%. We are still in shelter in place at the hospital, and we'll continue that until things change. But we are talking, as everyone is, about reopening and an exit strategy. And for that, I will turn it over to Dr. Kidd, and she can let you know where we are and what we're thinking about that.
Sure, thank you for having us. As you said, Kelly, our main focus has been on expanding capacity should it be needed in testing, and that's gone very well, and we're very thankful that at this point we haven't needed to expand capacity. We've actually been at about 50% of normal for our census and our ED visits because everyone is doing such a wonderful job sheltering in place. So we are starting to look forward to the future and to how we can proceed with what I call an exit strategy. How do we get out of this and avoid a secondary surge without a vaccine or other therapies in place? So we're starting to gather the criteria that might be used to activate that. Nothing has been set in stone yet. Obviously, it's a very fluid situation, and we're following the national guidelines as well. Some of the things we're looking at, we're just starting to see now, which is some have proposed that we use at least 14 days with a decrease in the number of newly positive cases as an indicator that it might be safe to transition. We also want to be respectful and follow the shelter in place guidelines that are there without mobilizing excess number of people for healthcare needs electively that could stimulate a spread. It's also very important to have adequate testing. Although we've made enormous strides in this and we've been able to get a decent supply of swabs now that regulations have been relaxed a little bit with what mediums are allowed, those tests, even though it's improved, still can take 24 to 48 hours to return. We do have the machine for some of the faster testing, namely the Abbott machine, but software and testing supplies for that are slow to roll out as well. So we're not currently able to do that. We are also exploring the pluses and minuses of antibody testing. There's definitely a role for that. The role that it plays at the hospital is yet to be determined. It is not a standalone test. It cannot in itself at this point confer that somebody actually has immunity. It simply states that they have immunoglobulins, and what state in their infection they are at, it can't precisely define yet. I do anticipate that's coming in the near future, and as so it will become a more active part of our algorithm. We have asked for testing and we are on a wait list to even obtain the supplies needed. So again, this is all still very limited by supplies. PPE has overall been done well, largely because we have a decrease in our census, but the supply chain restrictions remain. So that is a balancing act. And of course, we are still using more since we are using universal precautions and masking with all who are in the hospital out of precaution. So we are in the early stages. We are trying to figure out how we can safely get people back to more elective procedures, although I do believe it will be a very graduated approach and it will take some time, and we have yet to set a date for that. There's a lot more that needs to happen before we're quite ready. So happy to answer any questions you all may have.
I have a question. How does the county released some data and charts from the models they did that had a peak a couple months out? How does that line up with what you said about we might have already seen our peak?
So there's several different models out there, and their methodologies and their origins are very different. The one that had the highest numbers and that I believe was used at the county level was from the Imperial College of London, that was also used nationally at some levels. And the total numbers on all of that were higher and later. The state had a model that was slightly different methodology that predicted a much later peak. And then this newest model that a lot of people have followed was updated a little bit more regularly with new numbers from our experience, as well as combining experiences from other countries that are ahead of us, such as China, South Korea, Italy, Spain. And it also took in the fact that, honestly, the Americans did a better job at sheltering in place than anyone anticipated. And that really changed things. So some of the models really didn't take that into account as aggressively in update. So I think that's why we're seeing things change. But we all remind ourselves that every model is just a model, and that it is very dependent on human factors, and so it could change rapidly. And so I don't think any of us know. We can really only do what we're doing, which is follow the numbers daily, and we're far from being through this.
Thank you. My second question is probably for Kelly, but I've heard that especially rural hospitals, with like the number of visits going down, that there's less money coming in, and it's sort of there's problems happening on different sides. But how are things with you all, and are you getting money from the state or the feds?
Yeah, so actually in March, we got a check, a couple checks from our supplemental funding source. So we were doing better than usual, but in March we were down about $1 million. Our net revenue is $4 million, about there a month. So $1 million for us is quite a bit. And then on Friday last week, we received a check for $1 million from the CARES program, federally funded. So that really was a relief. Am I projecting that we're going to be okay? Yes, but we definitely are seeking many sources. FEMA, there's a couple district hospital specific advances we can get. The health plans have been great about paying us earlier. So I think we're going to make it okay, but I'm hoping we can get, as we talked about, operations back at least by the end of June. And that's the end of our fiscal year.
Thank you.
Other questions? I do have a question. You mentioned that adequate testing is required for this to potentially open up. What does adequate testing look like? How many tests per day, and how far away are we from that? And maybe you don't even know because it's dependent on things that are outside of your control.
Yeah, I can't accent how far away. I can tell you the things that I'm looking at is, in order to do high risk procedures, which includes intubations, which is essential to doing many OR procedures or airway management, those are all very high risk. So most people agree that you would like to have a negative test, if at all possible, before doing anything that is not absolutely emergent. So we're trying to take that into consideration and figure out how we can build a model with accurate testing that allow us to do that. If we had the in-house Abbott test and it was considered adequate, that is one possibility. When we get those supplies, we don't know where we're at on the waiting list. If we can make do with some longer term turnaround, since Quest has improved its turnaround time, we may be able to do kind of a tiered approach with that as well. We also, when I say adequate supplies, I mean not just to open procedures or other things that are somewhat risky to do with an unknown status, but it's also to immediately be able to handle a small outbreak if it were to occur, so that we could have all the supplies necessary to immediately test any possible exposures and have that done quickly and easily. We're not there yet, just based on the supply chain.
Okay, so I guess it was a misunderstanding on my part. When you're talking about opening back up, you mean specifically just the hospital opening back up to normal services, and it's not to those, not like the community writ large.
I think they'll be somewhat at the same time, but there may be some things we can do at the hospital level in order to keep people healthy before the entire community is moving around as much.
Okay, great. And then the other question is, do you have additional concerns, this being a tourist community? So we have 14 days with no new cases in Sonoma County, Sonoma Valley, City of Sonoma, but the fact that we bring so many people in, is that an additional concern? Does that make our community more at risk for staying closed longer?
I think that will be hopefully decided on a larger level that will protect us. But yes, if people were to take from the cities and whatnot to come vacation, that would put us at increased risk of transmission. I've heard recently that, on the governmental level, some people are starting to band together to possibly help with that. So I think we'll look back to the governmental level to help us with that.
And then finally, PPE, how are we doing there? Do you have adequate supplies of PPE? Are you accepting donations of PPE?
All of the above, yes. We have adequate supplies. We are being very conservative. We've instituted safe reuse protocols where applicable. We are accepting donations and trying to stay ahead of the game. We will need more in order to resume normal functions.
Great. Well, not great, but thanks for the knowledge. Appreciate it. I'd rather you have more than what you need. Great.
Could I ask one more question?
Mm-hmm.
So with regard to masks, and so now we're talking about people wearing cloth masks or homemade masks, and I don't know, maybe, I know Riverside has mandated it. I haven't heard anything about that up here, but some people are doing it. Anyway, so what is the current recommended protocol about wearing masks when you're out?
I can answer that just because as we were preparing for this meeting, I got the alerts from Sonoma County that there's now an official health order as of tonight for what we call universal masking. And the way it's defined for our county is that an individual must wear a mask, not in N95 specifically, you're not to wear those, but another type of homemade cloth mask or other approved non-N95 at all times. I believe it says when indoor outside of your home or in an enclosed outdoor location, or if you're unable to maintain 6 feet of distance from another individual. And that is new as of basically 6 o'clock tonight. I got the notification. We have been following that in the hospital for several weeks, that we all have universal masking as well. So it looks like it's now at the county level.
And the N95 rule, is that just because they don't want people rushing out and buying them to save them for hospitals? Because I know a lot of people just happen to have them in the closet from the fires.
I mean, if you had one in your closet from the fire that couldn't be donated or used, that's probably acceptable if it's all you have. But I think the point is to have people not get them and deplete the supply chain further, because they really are needed for high-risk procedures and taking care of patients.
And at this point, couldn't be donated. Basically what you guys want, my understanding, is new in the box, untouched, verifiably untouched masks.
Yes, for the most part. And there are some times we can reprocess some things that have been open, but we're happy to accept anything that people are willing to give up. And as far as a cloth mask, the best thing I've seen is a 4-ply high thread count, put a coffee filter in it, and you're pretty good to go.
And the community center has been making masks as well.
Right.
They're having
Lots of sources have, yes.
Yeah, great.
I spoke to, this is Madeline, and I spoke to Eric Jackson today because I'm looking for some personal masks. And I think they've separated the N95s for the hospital, and they also have others that are coming in. So I'm sure that's probably, as you said, Logan, a place for people to be able to look at that.
Any other questions for, thank you, Madeline. Any other questions for Kelly or Dr. Kidd? All right, excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
Thank you. And I'm sorry I have to jump off, but thank you all.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
And for all you're doing.
So Rebecca, if you could turn to the next slide. The next slide really talks about where the city council's leadership has been focused. Go back one. So here, There are a number of different efforts underway. Mayor Harvey's been working with the Food Security Task Force. Mayor Harvey and Councilmember Harrington are on the Community Support and Resiliency Fund in consultation with me as EOC Director. This is funding where Council set $100,000 aside, not knowing what we're going to need as we go through this unique experience. And so we'll be meeting this week to begin those conversations. Vice Mayor Hunley is the liaison to the Sonoma Valley Chamber of Commerce. Councilmember Harrington is the liaison to Fish and La Luz. Councilmember Ragamonte is the liaison to Vintage House. Councilmember Cook is the liaison to the Sonoma Valley Vintners and Growers. Vice Mayor Hunley is the liaison to this art liaison to this arts task force. So some of our arts community coming together. And then Mayor Harvey and Vice Mayor Hunley are a subcommittee working on kind of state and federal legislation and advocacy. So while the council is in shelter in place, like the rest of our community, they are definitely Zooming and being active and reaching out and supporting things in the community and a leadership role as they can. I can turn to the next slide, please. So this is just briefly, the city's Emergency Operations Center. The City Council is who I report to as Emergency Operations Center Director. We have a very robust public information team that is putting out all kinds of product, and I'll talk to you more about that. We have had David Storr, who's our planning director, embedded with the county homelessness task force. And for the last 3 weeks, we've just pulled him out this week and moved Michelle Fajardo in. Michelle's one of our managers in public works, and we're going to pull David back in to do some work back on the planning side of the house now. We've done consultations with our city attorney, and you'll hear more from him on the evictions. And then the way Emergency Operations Center is organized is there's kind of an operation focus, a plan focused logistics, where logistics here are really about community food and coordination, support to a number of our nonprofits. There's always a finance section to make sure that we can get reimbursed by FEMA. And then this is a kind of a new where we, like everyone else, had moved to move to essential services. And so Sue Casey, our assistant city manager, has been helping kind of deal with all of those implications. And then there's regular calls with the hospital, the health clinic, myself with the other city managers in the county EOC, a lot of coordination. Our 3 business engines, the Chamber of Vintners and Growers, the Visitors Bureau, the Food Security Task Force, RepProp, school district, nonprofits, et cetera. So this is the Emergency Operations Center. If you turn to the next page, next slide. But typically we're in our EOC. This is not how we are anymore. So if you turn to the next slide, this is how we are operating, just like you all are. So most of our, probably over 50, 60% of our staff, other than our maintenance team, is virtual. And we are running the EOC virtually. And this is how we're communicating on a daily basis. Next slide. So our focus in the EOC really has been to open the EOC, coordinate with Sonoma County and public health. The second focus has been really the safety of our employees and customers, trying to communicate out the orders and everything that's been done by the state and the public health officer. And then again, unique for this emergency, but a lot of support to the community in terms of public information and food. So that's really been the focus for the first month. Next slide, please. At the same time, we are continuing to kind of maintain our essential operations, and those essential operations are the whole keeping the financial side of the city running, from billing to accounting to paying our vendors, all the FEMA tracking as well. And then there's been a lot of, for everyone who has employees, on a lot of new regulations for employees and communicating that out. Police and fire have continued their code enforcement and their operations, and honestly, police and fire calls are down. They're much lower than what we typically see at this time of year. And then we've been having code enforcement help do education and enforcement with police for enforcement of the public health orders. Building and inspection services continues. At this point, it's really focused on projects that have at least 10% affordable housing. But we are accepting applications, and so Wayne and his team are working through that. On planning, continue to accept and process plan permits, and there's a focus on Cannabis Development Code and UGB. Cemetery is also an essential operation. Not every city has a cemetery, but we do. 3 different cemeteries, and we're continuing to take calls and follow up as needed there. And then obviously our public works team is maintaining our water, streets, and park systems, and those essential operations. Next slide. Public information. This has been a large lift and always is an emergency to try to put good information out to our community via our website, social media, e-newsletters, press releases, ads, and videos. This slide shows kind of all of our different social media accounts, and really would encourage people to sign up for our e-newsletter. That e-newsletter gets delivered to your box every Friday and sums up the key news. I'll dive into this a little deeper and show you a few other things that the team has done. Next slide, please. So first, the city's website, www.sonomacity.org. You can see across the top there all the new tiles and places to get information to respond to this emergency. It really is your portal to local information. You can also look at all the news and the press releases and different things that have been put out. Next slide, please. In terms of public information, there's also been a great thing I want to commend the team for is putting together the Sonoma Valley Food Assistance Calendar. And the website is right there. So you go to our website, /food-calendar. It lists all the free food distributions in the Valley. Super easy. And again, the great thing about our website, you can go to the bottom, click translate, and it automatically translates to Spanish or any other language that Google supports. So unless it's a kind of printed document, probably 90% of the items on our website are really translatable. And this food calendar is a great tool. There's been a lot of work to support the Food Security Task Force, which is a community, really, I would call it a collaborative leaders who came together to work on that. And then we've been coordinating also with the county EOC, and as they put information out through their Joint Information Center, making sure it gets out to our community. Press releases and op-eds. And then recently, if you click to the next slide, we've done a few other unique things. One, in this time of digital, we still need to do good old-fashioned non-digital outreach. So Friday's paper, there were full-page ads, one in English and one in Spanish, laying out community resources. And these same ads will be in the paper this coming Friday as well. These types of posters and information have been made into posters, put around town. They've been distributed as kind of flyers through the school district. And then used, I think Bob Taylor's been using these to do different updates as well. So again, a variety of things. I want to thank the Chamber for helping kind of distribute a bunch of these posters up the Valley. I want to thank Supervisor Gorin, who split the cost for us for these ads in the paper, and the Index Tribune that's giving us kind of a double run. So 50% off would be a way to describe it. And then there's the next slide shows we have a new video where you can really hear about all our local nonprofits. And I want to thank Mayor Harvey for putting together, kind of being the facilitator, but we've got folks from some of our local heroes from Fish, Laluz, Vintage House, Sonoma Overnight Support. About just under 15 minutes. It's a great way to hear directly from people that are on the streets, providing food and really shifting their own missions or continuing their missions to support our Valley. And one of the key parts of this was to communicate out the good work that's being done, but also talk about the importance that we really need folks to both volunteer and to donate financially if you can to support these efforts. So I want to thank Mayor Harvey's been a leader in this. But there's a wide coalition that's come together. On the food side, Lisa Jansen, if you turn to the next slide, please. She usually manages our community events, and in the EOC, we basically have tapped her to be the coordinator for food, both within the Valley and then back out to the county. So there's a lot of logistics, and she's using her skills to help coordinate and pull all these together. So if you want to learn more about who's involved in this, you can go to sonomacity.org/food-security. It gives you more information. On that same page, it will tell you how to donate and how to volunteer. So again, how you can help our town and our Valley. Next slide, please. I want to give a shout out to Sustainable Sonoma. They also become part of this Sonoma as part of the Food Security Task Force. And they really wanted to create an agile website where people could volunteer locally and it was easy. So they created this SonomaValleyVolunteers.org in about 4 days. It launched the end of March. There are 12 local Sonoma Valley organizations that have their urgent volunteer needs posted. And then organizations are definitely, it's great. Part of what's happening is they're basically communicating that there are new volunteers and a new younger cohort coming out, because so many of our core volunteers are over the age 65 and not able to step out and do the work they usually do. So there is the website at over 450 users, and it's getting 30 to 90 users a day and sometimes more. So I want to thank Sustainable Sonoma for creating and maintaining the site. And just if you haven't had a chance to reach out, wear your new mask, go on out and volunteer and help some of these food efforts. The next slide shows just some of the different places you can volunteer, and this takes you to each of these organizations that are doing good work in our community. So you can go donate and learn more. Next slide, please. In terms of the food security update, again, we talked about the calendar and where you can find more. The next slide really gives some basic statistics, and these are pretty amazing considering we've only been in this about a month. So if you turn the next slide, please. So this is not all agencies have reported, but the school district basically on a weekly basis is serving about 9,000 children. Meals on Wheels are a similar type of delivery to senior programs, about 600 people a week. Redwood Empire Food Bank, boxes of groceries, over 1,500. Vintage House Senior Meals, over 1,000. Sonoma Family Meals, these are 4 packs of meals that can be picked up, and these are part of the rest, their model is basically purchasing them from restaurants. So some of our restaurants here in the Valley have been hired to make these meals. They've done 3,200 packs so far have been provided. The Ed Foundation did gift cards, over 900 $50 gift cards were provided. And then Sonoma Overnight Support has almost fed about 1,000 folks over the course of their time too. So there's just, I think the magnitude of the numbers is impressive in terms of what has been done by our community in literally probably a month, but also the need, and there is a deep need. And so if folks are able to donate time or donate financially, we would encourage you to do that. Next slide, please.
Mayor, could I comment for a second on the last slide?
Absolutely.
Okay, there are 2 Meals on Wheels in Sonoma. One is local and one is county. So which one is this Meals on Wheels?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't have that level of detail. I'll be happy to find that out and send that back out to council. Okay. We're hoping to do a more detailed report as well.
All right, thank you.
In terms of support to Sonoma Overnight Support, which is our homeless provider here in the Valley, they have continued to provide regular foods to clients. Kathy King and her team continue to just step up and figure it all out and do good work. They've got a great partnership with Sonoma Valley Community Health Clinic, so they are daily checking temperatures so we can make sure that our homeless community is hopefully staying well. And if there is any spike of temperature, then be able to kind of move forward and do what we can try to do to protect folks. The county also is looking at folks that are over 65 and have some kind of a medical condition that may be, they are going to be targeting those folks to move them to a different location and provide housing in a more stable environment. And we're hoping that happens at some point within the next, say, week or so. The winter shelter has been extended through April, and this is a picture of the ADA shower facility that was brought in over the weekend in order to provide shower facilities to the community. And with this, I'd like to shift to Mark Bodenhammer, who's been just providing great, courageous leadership with his cohorts, Tim Zahner and Maureen Cottingham from our other economic agencies. So Mark, I'll turn to you from the business community.
Cool. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Mayor Harvey, members of the council. I do want to just start off just recognizing the community as a whole. It's really been just unbelievably impressive to see how quickly and creatively everybody has adapted to this new situation. And as we all know, it's been something new every day that gets thrown our way. We start feeling like we have a sense of where we're at, and then there's new rules, new changes, and it's just been really incredible. So all of the things, the Food Security Task Force, the volunteer portal, and some of the things that we've worked on together with our partners at Vintners and Growers and the Visitors Bureau, I just am really proud of the community. So I just wanted to start off with that note. I also do want to recognize Tim and Maureen. All three of our business organizations are doing everything in partnership. There are no, there's no territorial aspects of what we have going on. We're all trying to do everything that we can to support our business community. Obviously, the health and safety of the people of Sonoma comes first, and worrying about food security is a top priority. But we're trying to make sure that we can keep some economic activity coming so that we can have jobs for everybody when we get back. And we really do appreciate being a part of this meeting and having a seat at the table here, because it's been a lot of work to try and keep things going together. Thankfully, it's starting to maybe feel like the dust is settling a little bit, and we have a sense of where we're at. So with that in mind, we're actually launching our survey tomorrow to see where everybody is at and get some good data points from the community. We've done some anecdotal site visits and checked out shopping centers, office buildings, and things like that. And what we found is it's about 75% of businesses in the Valley are shut down. And you can imagine the 25% or so that are open, how much activity they're having. It's not much. Nobody's making a profit right now. It's really just a matter of trying to hang on, keep some people employed, and give these businesses a chance when the relaunch does finally happen. What we're working on, we are working really closely with all levels of government. So the state is doing an awesome job of taking care of people who unfortunately were laid off or furloughed. And so we're providing information to employers that they can share with employees that they're having to cut hours or cut entirely, so that they know how to access those safety nets, and we can take care of all of the people in Sonoma Valley. We're also trying to work with the federal government to get information out about CARES funding. So that has been a rocky rollout. The PPP funding has been run through small local banks, and there's been some information challenges, and the information got to the banks pretty late. So it's been a little bit of a stop and start, and we're hopeful that that's going to start leveling off and we'll start having better success there. EIDL has been run directly through, that's the emergency economic injury disaster loan, that's being run directly through the SBA. And we have actually heard some success stories of people who made an EIDL loan application and are expecting to be funded, and in fact may have been funded today. So there is the money that was allocated by the federal government is starting to roll out, and it sounds like we may start seeing some of that here in the Valley. So that's a great sign, and something that's positive. As you see on the page, we're sending out all kinds of information, access to all these different information portals, because everybody else, the Sonoma County Economic Development Board, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and some of these other organizations are just doing a fantastic job of keeping all of that information updated up to the minute in a very dynamic and fluid situation. Here in Sonoma, we've partnered with the Visitors Bureau and the Vintners and Growers to create sonomatogo.com. So that's a special website that's dedicated just to businesses that are operating right now and trying to keep their operations up and running. It's free to participate. Any business that is can demonstrate the fact that they fall under the essential businesses category, we will list you. There's a link on the main page so that anybody that wants to be listed just needs to send us a quick email, and we're getting, sometimes 5, sometimes up to a dozen new.
Mark's paused.
Uh-oh.
Well, Mark's paused. Amy, or Mark, you paused for the last maybe 15, 20 seconds.
Okay, so sonomatogo.com, that's our website. Businesses can be listed for free. And we have seen some businesses that had shut down that are now coming back. And that's really kind of a positive sign for me. And that's helping us get through that. We have daily Zoom briefings that we're doing through the Chamber of Commerce to keep people informed. We've thankful to our mayor, to our city manager, Congressman Thompson, Senator Dodd. We've had people from all up and down the government there. Those are free for anybody in the Valley to participate in, but obviously a business focus. And we're all working to do new virtual networking opportunities. So we have a virtual minute mixer. The vintners and growers have Sonoma Valley at Home, and the Visitors Bureau is working on a video series. So all three organizations are kind of figuring out how can we continue representing this great business community while this is happening. So we are also, as Kathy mentioned, doing a lot of outreach with the city, trying to get posters and new information out to businesses. And the last thing I just want to say is a sincere thank you to the community for supporting our local businesses through this time. We are hearing stories of restaurants that are, you know, it's not a great time for them, but they're hanging on. They're able to get enough through their doors with these to-go orders that it's making a huge difference. And I really appreciate everybody on the council and the city staff and everybody out in the community that is, we're all facing budget concerns right now. So it's really heartwarming to see that happening, and we just can't thank you enough. We're hopeful that we can start opening things up soon as that's safe. And on behalf of all the businesses, we look forward to welcoming the entire community back in as soon as it's safe to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'd like to move to questions. I think, Amy, you may have had a question on the last presentation. Want to go ahead?
I did. Hi. One question I had for Kathy is, was there a county order to close cemeteries, or why are cemeteries closed to people that want to go there to visit graves or other activities? You're on mute.
Kathy, you're mute. Kathy, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. You know, I will have to double check on that. My understanding is some of our cemeteries are cemeteries quasi parks. So I was not aware that I know we had closed kind of the mountain cemetery because it is kind of a pass up. I don't think we've closed any of the other cemeteries, and I'd be happy to follow up on that. Again,
what does that pass up mean?
Sorry, what I mean is because Mountain Cemetery really works somewhat as a walking trail, park, that type of thing, it's kind of it has two capacities. And so obviously folks that would still want to go visit a loved one isn't a different than a hike. So.
Okay, well, I like to make that distinction so that if people want to visit graves there, they still can.
Yeah, happy to look at how we sign that. Thank you.
So, and Mr. Mayor, I had a question for Mark.
Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to know, I think I emailed Mark a few days ago or just even yesterday, just about the takeout, pickup type of, things that the restaurants are doing. And Mark, you said that that's really kind of might be helping, but is that survey you're going to do? Do you think that'll be included in that, or it's not something that you're interested in? Thanks.
Yeah, it's absolutely, let me make sure my sound is on. Great. Yes, absolutely. That's a key thing. I mean, the hospitality industry, sometimes we have, we get complaints from other parts of the community that they get a lot of the limelight here in Sonoma Valley, but the reality is they are getting hit so hard by this. And in fact, it started well before we actually felt that shutdown. I mean, if you go back to the calendar that our city manager put up there, we all know when the shutdown started happening, but some of the major conferences in San Francisco were starting to get canceled weeks before we really started feeling a direct impact. So it's been hitting all of them. And so, yes, we will absolutely be gathering information from them about that. And yes, the efforts of people in the community is helping a lot. Not every business is up and running, but the ones that are, I'm hearing positive things. And not only are they succeeding on their own, but some of them are turning it into charitable contributions. So I know specifically at Kivelstad, which just opened up in the old Shellville place, they are doing family meals, and for every family meal they sell, they're contributing a meal to a family in need, someone who was laid off. So the system is working, the community's coming together, and it's, we're doing the best we can to hang on. But, we really do need more funding. The first round of funding from the feds was a nice start, but we need to pressure the federal government to keep priming that pump so that we can have these businesses hold on so that they'll be able to be there. The efforts from the community are helpful, but it's not enough to pay the rent and pay the bills and pay employees. So if it all comes together and we can start opening up soon, then we'll get through this, and we'll get through it either way. But it's just a matter of how much damage we're going to incur.
Thank you, Mark.
And thank you, Madeline. Your patronage is helping these guys. So we appreciate it.
I'm
Other
gaining
questions from-
pounds from it. Thank you, Mark.
Aren't we all?
Other questions from council?
I have a general question, probably for Kathy. Could you clarify the situation with the bike path? Pedestrians, yes. Bicycles, no. And why?
Yeah, so when this decision was made, I mean, this came shortly after, if you remember, a weekend where it was beautiful and a lot of folks went out, headed out to the beach, and folks were in kind of county parks. And so they're county parks director, and I think the county public health officer really came down kind of with a hard order to try to keep everyone safe, which was all parks are closed, and that included state parks at the beach, county parks, and it also included city parks. And where there were bike trails, and I think it's police could pipe up our public works director, it was a certain class of bike trails. They didn't want people, they wanted to have enough room for the walkers. And so what they basically said is there were certain paths where there were no bikes allowed in order to have more space for walkers, because as bike was coming along, the walkers were then having to kind of cluster and move to the side, and then there wasn't enough social distancing. So that's what was being seen in other places. I'm not sure that was as true for a lot of the municipal trails or bike paths. Maybe up on our trails that could have been true, but the bottom line is that was the direction, that is the decision. I did reach out to the county 2 weeks ago to see if there was any flexibility in kind of some of the municipal parks, so keeping playgrounds closed and basketball courts, but trying to open some of our green space, clarity on the trails, on this kind of bike trail question, and the answer was not at this time. Just really feeling like we needed to kind of really lock down the shelter place. But I do think as we start, if we're able to start to roll out of it, that is a question of how do we start to open up some parks in gradual places. There was also a conversation today on a call with state parks that we're going to put some additional clarification. They're going to be changing some of their signs on the state park property. That people walking along the General Vallejo Road is fine. People on the trail, walking on the trail is fine. So we talked about that today in a call, and we'll be working with them to try to create some additional clarity. It really is kind of a no bikes, so there's more room for pedestrians with a line of watch.
What do you mean by on the trail? People on the trail is fine.
People on the bike trail. When I'm talking like the trail that goes from Maxwell all the way to Sebastiani, that main kind of bike walking trail that goes through the state parks and through town.
Okay.
There's, based on the order that came down from public health, there's no bikes that should be on that trail.
It's unfortunate. I've heard from a lot of people who work at grocery stores and things like that. They've been like, why can't I ride my bike to work? I ride it regularly to work, and it's very frustrating. And
yeah,
it is unfortunate that the county's making the decision, but they have the public health team and they have the public health officer that's making decisions.
Yeah, I'm hoping when there comes an opportunity, we can use a little more of a scalpel and open this a little more.
Sure. David, did you have questions for Kathy or Mark?
No, I'm actually fine.
Okay, great.
Maybe just one slide then in closing, and if council has any other questions, and we can go to public comment too. But going forward, so Governor Newsom announced today that he will be releasing a plan tomorrow about kind of lifting some of the coronavirus constraints. So basically, he's going to be putting out some kind of a detailed plan tomorrow. This is not going to we're not going to flip a switch. And we're going to go from not being shelter in place to being, but this is exactly what we need, is kind of a roadmap out of here. How do we peel back this onion, still contain the virus, but start to open up our economy? and start to create some of the flexibility I know we're all looking for. So we don't know what this will be. Looking forward to hearing this. Sonoma County has had a task force, and I think once we hear from the governor, it will be time for us to really sit down and start working with our local business community as well. There is another couple places the city is working. One, we are continuing to work on looking at the impacts for the last 6 weeks on our financial picture, and then also looking at going forward. So we will be bringing back to council some budget amendments for the current budget, doing an abbreviated and adjusted budget for 2021, a multi-year forecast. There, in the first CARES Act, there was funding for cities over 500,000, and at this point, there's no funding coming to small cities under 500,000. And clearly, as our business community is being hurt deeply by this, it directly affects our city revenues as well. But meanwhile, we will continue. We're actively working on that, but we will continue to support the community efforts, and then in terms of food security, evictions, you'll be talking about in a minute. And again, just proud and humbled by the work that everyone's doing and how everyone comes together to help. So happy to take any other questions that weren't answered previously and/or public comment. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, hoping for maybe a shelter in places order coming up. That would be kind of nice. All right. Good.
Mayor Harvey, if I may, are we done with the PowerPoint? I'll stop sharing.
Yes. Great. And I guess this time we're going to take our first attempt at public comment. Rebecca, it's on you now. You're going to be reading the public comments. So I'll go ahead and open it. And so we're going to open it, wait for 3 minutes as public comments come in. And again, you're allowed to submit your public comments since the opening of this meeting for any item that's on the agenda, including this one. And then this one will close in the next 3 minutes, and we will no longer be accepting public comment. If you had any questions for the presentation that you've just heard, those are also acceptable at this time. So please submit those and we'll get those answered as best as possible. And we'll open public comment now.
All right, we do have some that we've already received. I'm starting the 3 minutes, and LaTanya will actually be reading those in, so there's some distinction of voices.
Okay, our first question, and please forgive me if I pronounce your name wrong, sir. Fred Allback. This was for Kelly Mather. Are the tests reliable, and what is the level of confidence in the tests?
And unfortunately, we don't have anyone with our hospital community. I think my understanding is there are some questions about the overall reliability of some of the testing, but that would be a good question for them to answer in more detail.
Would it be possible for you to reach out to Kelly with that question and just get it back?
Be happy. Anything we can't answer tonight, we'll be happy to put together a little Q&A and post it with the agenda.
That would be great. Thank you. On to the next.
Okay. The next is Tom Conlon, and Kathy, this is probably for you. Item 3.1. Some Bay Area cities like Oakland, San Francisco, etc., have shut down some local streets to give local residents more room to walk and exercise while retaining safe distancing. Sonoma has shut down its very popular bike paths and parks, so residents now must walk only on sidewalks, which are narrow. Is there any plan to close local streets to expand options for safe exercising?
Yeah, I can appreciate this weekend, definitely saw a lot of folks out enjoying our spaces. But at this point, there is not a plan to shut down streets. Just the overall traffic circulation, I think, is still kind of important, and what it would take for us to do that. So there's no plan at this point. But if we stayed here for a long time, we may need to get more creative.
Question. So typically when we do public comment, we run through all of them and then answer questions. Is that how we should be doing this now?
Yeah.
Okay. Kathy, you got a hold.
Sorry, it's a little awkward. Right. Sorry.
And just to clarify though, the bike path is open. You can walk on the bike path.
Correct.
All right. So we'll go through them all, LaTanya. Thank you so much. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
That actually completes the public questions and comments. There were only 2.
We're done. And I'll close public comment with the magic. Oh wait, we have more.
We have 34 seconds left on the 3 minutes.
Okay.
So we have just a few more minutes. I'll let you know when we when we're up. I guess I could do that.
Oh, there we go.
Except for it's backwards. Okay.
All
That's
right.
it.
Great. I'll close public comment with the magic clap, and it's closed. Awesome. Comments from council members? Anybody? Rachel, I see you move into the computer.
Only a brief comment. Thank you everyone for the information. And I think that Sonoma's doing a great job with the shelter in place. And hopefully, as the Queen said, we will be together soon.
Councilmember Harrington, comments?
Oh, I mean, same thing. Everybody hang in there. You're doing a great job. I did want to say, you know, I don't know what the methods are. I saw the police talking to people on the speaker through their police car about not being in the park, but I also saw this weekend a group of Hells Angels pull up and then go in the park extensively. So I'm just wondering, what is the enforcement? I definitely didn't say anything to them, but what is the enforcement and what is going on about the use of the plaza? I also saw a bunch of people with dogs in the plaza today and some other things. So I think as the weather gets nicer, that's going to be an ongoing, you know, desire of people to use the plaza. And what are your thoughts about that, Kathy?
Well, so what we've done, we've had some, knowing this was going to be more of an issue, I've contracted with, added a little bit of time to our code enforcement. In addition to having our law enforcement be able to respond, also having code enforcement out on the trail and around the park. So we're going to be looking at kind of hours. We may want to look at some time over the weekend because I, saw folks down over the weekend as well. And by the time I walked down on the plaza to talk to folks, I heard the police, on their mic, on their announcement, moving folks along. So I know it's hard. It's beautiful. It's lovely. You want to be out there, but we really need to, if one person does it, two will do it. And pretty soon we'll have everyone on the plaza again. And that's not the order. So everyone needs to hang tough. We have beautiful places to walk and be in this valley and community and still be local. So be creative. And I really am hoping that if we've started to hit this peak, that we can then start to peel back the onion and maybe open up some of our public spaces in a different way. And if we're all going to be masked, frankly, that's one of the first steps. And based on, that announcement, I think that potentially allows for some different things moving forward. So to be determined. But we're adding some staff capacity to try to do broader education and enforcement as needed.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Agamonte, do you have a comment or question? You all right? Councilmember Cook?
Yeah, I just wanted to, thank our residents for sheltering in place and doing the right thing, and all of our essential businesses along with their employees. Very proud of Sonoma, and hopefully we'll be coming out of this soon. So, and I just want to thank the Chamber of Commerce and the vintners and growers and for all the good work that they're doing out there, along with all the other nonprofits. So thank you.
I guess just one comment, of course, as all of you, everybody's been wonderful. I've been trying to walk every day. People are very friendly. We're walking and avoiding each other. And I appreciated the T-Rexes that were at the plaza yesterday. There were 5 people dressed in costumes, and they were all T-Rexes of different colors, staying 6 feet away from each other.
Funny.
Wonderful. I saw your video. That was fantastic. I also want to thank the community. It's been an extremely difficult time for everyone to shelter in place. I want to encourage people. We do have beautiful roads to walk on, and there is a lot of nature to be had if you know where to look for it. And I really think it is nice to get outside. I encourage that to happen. So even though our parks are closed, there are very nice streets to walk on, and there's never been less traffic. So it has been kind of a nice experience as well. See a lot of people out on their bikes. I also really want to give a special thank you to all of our city staff. Everybody has been working a lot, extra time, overtime, to try to keep the community safe. And this is with kids at home. Some people are going from part-time work to full-time plus. I definitely want to thank all the city staff. We had Public Works out at the Hannah Boy Center today when we did the big food drops. It was the first time we were out at Hannah. We had combined Slurry and El Verano. We served 450 meals in the span of about an hour and a half, and it went well. We had a little bit of chaos, but there was pet food and everything else, and it went quite well. So really want to thank everybody who was involved with that, everybody who volunteered on that. Want to doubly encourage people to volunteer and to donate, especially to Redwood Empire Food Bank. They are seeing a major impact, a 7-time increase in the amount of food that they're producing throughout the county and in the valley. And I really want to thank Lisa Jansen, city employee, who's just been absolutely fantastic. She's our events director, and we had an issue with Flowering El Verano. We're going to collapse, and people were not going to know where there was food. There was not going to be time to message. We were able to change that, get it set up, let everybody know, and it went off without a hitch. And she's also set up Sonoma Family Meal, which has been a free meal service. And that's also, Sonoma Family Meal is a fantastic organization that's getting some pass-through income through our local businesses, through our restaurants, Girl in the Fig, Picasso's and Palooza's, working with them, and then producing meals. They're being paid to produce the meals, and then they're handing out throughout the community. And that's another organization that's well worth donating to. I want to thank Kathy and the county for getting the showers for the Haven. I'd gone out there to volunteer and was hearing that there were people who had been 2 weeks without a shower. We got that done, and that was just fantastic. Really, really good job. So it's been a great team effort. And I appreciate all the other council members for the work that you are doing, and the great work that we're doing together. And Mark, thank you so much for connecting with our businesses. They're going through an extremely difficult time. If you have the means, I really do encourage you to go out and support our local businesses. They really need it, and they appreciate your help. So thank you so much for all of that. And we'll go on to the next item, which is item number. We're going on to consent calendar. Hooray. All items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and may be acted on by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request that these items be removed for separate action. And so we're going to open the public comment period for this for 3 minutes. If anybody has public comment, so if Rebecca, if you'd like to start the time now. And if we have any existing public comments on this, Latanya, do we have any existing public comments?
No, we do not.
I also want to thank Rebecca for figuring out how to do this meeting, because she figured out how to protect us from what happened in Windsor too. That was it was very good. We're feeling good there.
I'm going to step away for 1 minute and I will be right back.
Okay. Do you guys want to hear a coronavirus joke?
I do.
Good. Okay. What type of jokes does the CDC recommend during this pandemic? Inside jokes.
I don't know. Inside jokes.
Mayor Harvey, pun master.
That's not mine. That's not mine.
That is a dad joke extraordinaire. Hats off.
Do what I can. So we're gonna have to figure out how to fill these 3 minute periods. here. Maybe I'll announce public comment is open as we're finishing up the last item.
I think we're all supposed to start singing
We'll
it.
just fill it with sounds of barking dogs. Hey, do we know how many people are watching this Zoom meeting? Is there a way to tell that?
Hundreds of thousands.
I can't from this from here, and it doesn't tell us on the Civic web. I can look at YouTube and see how many are watching on YouTube.
I'll check it out.
But I can't do it. Yeah, you can do that.
How much time? 3
I can
minutes
go back
is a really long time.
It is. We have 30 seconds.
I
left.
looked on YouTube and it said it was not being broadcast.
It says 8 watching.
Tell us on the Civic web. I can look at YouTube and see.
How many more seconds?
It's gotta be Mark. We good? Closing public comment now. And thank you for the musical interlude, Mark. I think that was you. And we'll go ahead and do we have a motion on, or do we have council member comments or questions on public comment?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote.
Vice Mayor Henley,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Councilmember Agramonte, was that an aye? I didn't hear her. I'm sorry. Councilmember Harrington
Aye.
and Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Awesome. We'll move on to item 5.1, discussion of eviction protection measures and provide direction to staff. City Attorney Jeff Walter.
Thank you, Mayor Harvey.
Well, you're welcome.
As my staff report indicates, there have been 3 major directives that have operated to protect tenants from eviction during the COVID-19 pandemic. March 24, the County Board of Supervisors adopted an emergency ordinance that provided that in the event that a tenant is being evicted or non-payment of rent that resulted from COVID-19 reasons, such as being laid off, reduction in hourly rates or pay, or increased medical expenses due to COVID-19 reasons, that tenant need not pay rent and has a defense to an eviction that might be brought against that tenant. Then on March 27, the governor issued his executive order that lengthened the period of time within which a tenant who's facing an eviction lawsuit has to respond to that lawsuit. As we've discussed in the past, under normal circumstances, when a tenant is being evicted for non-payment of rent and has been served with a lawsuit to evict that tenant, a lawsuit to evict the tenant is called an unlawful detainer. The tenant has 5 days to respond to that lawsuit and appear in court to defend him or herself. The governor extended that period to 60 days. In addition, the governor issued an order that precluded the enforcement of eviction orders. And so a tenant who is already lost an unlawful detainer action by the time the executive order was issued and is faced with an order to remove him or herself from their premises, this order from the governor precluded the enforcement of that order. And then on April 6th, the Supreme Court issued its rule, a new court rule that precludes the issuance of summons on any unlawful detainer lawsuit filed for any purpose for a residential or commercial tenant. Very broadly sweeping rule that prohibits the service of a lawsuit that's been filed against a tenant. And under the American system of jurisprudence, when a person is sued, that person is entitled to notice of that lawsuit by being served with a complaint or a copy of the complaint, and then is entitled to be told how soon that person needs to respond and appear in court. The way the person who's being sued is informed of that response time is through a document called a summons. And the summons is issued by the court. And in their typical unlawful detainer, that piece of paper called the summons will tell the tenant that he or she has 5 days to respond or file an answer. The Supreme Court has issued a rule banning or prohibiting any court from even issuing a summons. So even if
For what period of time, Jeff?
indefinite.
That's wow.
Yeah, it's pretty broad. Actually, I'd say indefinite. Let me see. No, I'm not. That's not correct.
60 days? No.
No, this rule remain in effect until 90 days after the governor declares that the state of emergency is lifted. So it's 90 days beyond the date that the governor's emergency order is lifted.
It is indefinite because the emergency order is indefinite.
I'm sorry?
It's indefinite because the emergency order is indefinite at the moment.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. In addition, the court also prohibits the entry of any default against a tenant who fails to appear. And that order also lasts for 90 days past the time the governor lifts his emergency declaration.
Can you explain what you just meant there?
If a tenant is actually already in a legal process and has been properly served before this rule of court was issued by the Supreme Court on April 6th, that tenant must appear, must file an answer, must appear at a court hearing if there's been one set, to defend his or her, him or herself against the eviction. And if the tenant does not, and that happens quite regularly in unlawful detainer actions, tenants will not appear. The landlord is entitled to get a default judgment and a default order compelling that tenant to remove him or herself from the premises. The Supreme Court has now issued a rule saying default judgments cannot be entered against tenants who do not appear, who fail to answer. And that,
just to be clear, a default is that you didn't answer, so the other side wins. So it's like, I sued you, you didn't answer, I had to prove up without you present that what I said was true, and if I prove it up that it's true, you're not allowed to say anything and I win.
yeah, you lose by default.
Yeah.
And that's not allowed anymore under the Supreme Court's rule, which will
So what happens instead?
You get to stay in your basically this allows all commercial and residential tenants to stay in their premises essentially indefinitely. Now, as I said, it ends 90 days after the governor lifts his declaration of emergency.
It allows counties and cities to determine that.
No.
Or the state has now said completely commercial and okay.
Correct. Now, it does not mean you get to forever abandon the obligation to pay rent. It says nothing about that. In fact, the governor's executive order says his order does not remove tenant's liability for payment of rent. And the county's order requires that the back rent be paid within 60 days after the governor's ordinance, the governor's declaration terminates. So there still is an obligation to pay rent even after this pandemic is over.
What's the authority that the courts are using to do this?
It's a good question. I do not know. They promulgated these emergency rules 1 through 11, and I'm not sure I do not know the authority upon which they have issued these rules.
Divine order of COVID-19.
So I think it may be useful to just kind of have this run through in sort of like layman's terms, because I'm not an attorney and it would be easier for me. And you kind of explained it before to council. And so, okay, so I'm a tenant. I've been laid off. It's May 1st. I don't pay rent. What happens?
It's up to the landlord. The landlord could go through the process, and maybe many landlords will go through the process.
So the landlord says, you didn't pay rent. I want to evict you.
Okay, normally the landlord would send you what's called a 3-day notice to pay or quit, meaning you have the option of either paying the rent owed within 3 days of receipt of that notice or getting out.
Great.
You don't have to get out. You don't have to pay the rent. And if you don't do either, then the landlord theoretically has the right to file a lawsuit against you. That would probably violate the county's ordinance if in fact your non-payment is due to the fact you've been laid off due to COVID-19 reasons, because the county's ordinance states that a lawsuit or a notice delivered in violation of the county's ordinance is unlawful and would be a grounds for a defense against that unlawful detainer action. But let's assume the landlord ignores that, files a lawsuit against you, an unlawful detainer. You, in the meantime, under the governor's order, are required within 7 days of you withholding rent to give evidence to the landlord as to why you didn't and supporting your claim that it was due to COVID-19 reasons. Let's assume you did all of that, but the landlord didn't care, and the landlord continued to pursue your eviction. The landlord has filed a lawsuit against you, files it in Superior Court in Santa Rosa, and asks the court to issue a summons so a landlord can come over to your house and serve you with the lawsuit and the summons that requires you to respond within 60 days. The court clerk will not issue the summons. Will not. So the landlord has this piece of paper that he or she has filed seeking your eviction and essentially cannot do anything with it. So you can sit in your home for, as I said before, 90 days past the date that the governor's emergency declaration is lifted without paying rent and without fear of being evicted. Now, at some point, there is a day of reckoning, and that rent that you do not pay will be owed. And I think that the governor, in my view, is likely to come down with some additional guidance on that in the next 30, 40, 50, 60 days. But in the meantime, you don't have to pay it. And I think the hope is that as we get closer to the rollout of the process of extracting ourselves from this isolation requirement, that landlords and tenants will begin to talk to each other about how the tenants can begin to make those back pay, the back amount owed under the rental obligation paid to the landlord.
And then question, so if your rental agreement includes late fees or penalties, those go into the clock that's kind of ticking, waiting for you when you finally get to the eviction day, 90 days after the closure of the emergency order.
Presumably that's the case. There's no order or ordinance or rule of court that has been yet adopted that would prevent that from happening.
Great. What happens if your landlord hires a private security firm to come and remove you?
That's very unlawful. That's unlawful even pre-COVID-19.
Great. And then there have been a lot of questions that I've received and others have received regarding stopping of rent payment whatsoever and blocking that. What is the issue with that? Is it something that's lawful for us to do? Why or why not?
I'm not quite sure what you're asking me. Are you asking?
So we're going to cancel you. We're going to say that rents are illegal. Nobody has to pay rent in the city of Sonoma. Landlords are not allowed to charge rents and they are not due them from their tenants.
Well, there's been no order or ordinance that says that. And in my view, if the city were to step in and prohibit the payment of rent from a tenant to a landlord for an extensive period of time, that there'd be serious legal consequences that would flow. And there's a strong argument that that would constitute an unlawful taking of real property.
What does that mean?
That means that we are taking, by regulation, landlords' property by denying the landlord a reasonable rate of return on his or her real property, which is constitutionally guaranteed to property owners in the state of California and the United States of America. So when cities and counties or states move into the area of regulating the use of real property, be it rental or otherwise, we have to assure that there is some reasonable rate of return that the landlord retains, notwithstanding the regulations that are applied.
I think like an even simpler way of saying it is like, if you are requiring people to house people who cannot afford rent in your property that you own, if the state requires that by saying you're not allowed to charge rent and you do have to house people, then the state would be obligated to pay some amount for the value of requiring you to house people.
I think that's a way of saying it. Yeah.
I think this is Madeline. I was wondering that myself, as with respect to what Amy said, I wondered about something like that. And then the other thing is the day of reckoning, things are getting great. People are going back to work. Does anybody legislate payment or any of those things, how people pay for these things as they move forward and they're employed?
Councilmember Agramonte, I think that is going to happen. I think the governor will step in to do that. And if not, I suspect the county may be urged to do that. In my staff report, I indicated that the county board met last Tuesday and decided to leave its ordinance in place, but did ask that cities and other stakeholders come forward with issues that they still think need to be addressed that are not yet addressed in the 3 orders and ordinances I just mentioned: the governor's order, state Supreme Court's rule, and the county board's urgency ordinance. If you think there's something that we should convey to the county is open ears. One of the things that I think has worked very well in Sonoma County is that the cities and the county are very hopeful that the county's ordinance can be applied throughout the county, in both the cities and in the county. And that's how the cities thus far are positioning themselves. There's no city, to my knowledge, that has gone out on its own to adopt its own eviction protection ordinance or measure. So we are very much supportive of a uniform approach throughout the county. But as I said, the county board is interested in knowing whether there are things that have been missed that should be anticipated. And if this city council would like me to carry back that message, I'm more than happy to do so.
How is the question about post-emergency declaration and how any of these people have authority to do these things the way they're doing it? What's the answer to that now? Have they decided that they can do it? Because I don't think they can.
Well, the governor, as you know, issued an executive order giving counties and cities the authority to adopt eviction protection measures for both commercial and residential tenants. And his executive order that grants the cities to do that expires on May 31. So there is some question whether a county like the County Board of Supervisors here in Sonoma County can allow tenants to pay back rent up to 60 days beyond the expiration of that governor executive order. I think it's a very important question, and there's no real answer to it. It's problematic in my view. I think there's going to be, as I said before, some action on the part of the governor, maybe even the courts, but probably the governor, who will step in to lay out exactly what the payback period will be and whether late fees and interest can be imposed upon tenants who invoke the rights that the governor and the county has laid out for us.
But I mean, I have to imagine the governor can only do these things because he's operating under his emergency authority. And so then if the emergency ends, the only people left to act are the state legislature who haven't done these things. So it's like, I mean, it's a big question mark. And I guess we can assume they're not going to let it all just fall apart at the end, but I don't think we know.
No, I don't think we know either. I mean, if the governor could strategically extend the urgency to a point where and structure it such that the rent would then be due before the emergency is over, and also then waive penalties and late fees and interest along with it. Now recall too that, as I recall, the penal code section that prohibits price gouging, I believe it extends beyond the end of the emergency by a period of time too. And that was actually extended in one of the governor's executive orders.
Well, we've been under anti-price gouging since 2017, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. So there's some reserved authority apparently somewhere that allows these protections to occur beyond the end of the emergency that gave rise to the protection in the first place.
Mr. Mayor.
Of course, Madeline. You just muted yourself, though. So you're going to have to unmute it, and then you can go.
Okay.
You're muted again. Press it one time
All right.
and you get.
And, okay, so I had a question about I think that was a pretty bold move that the governor made with respect to residential and commercial. And as you and I have discussed, I'm sort of wiggling on the commercial part. What I don't understand, what kind of impact is that on, I mean, I would be on us, our city. I think that's part of something we're going to be discussing. But is there an impact? Why would he make, where does that bold decision come from? Because it's very different from residential.
Well, as I mentioned, the governor, all he did was authorize cities and counties to adopt their own eviction protection measures and authorize cities and counties to make those measures applicable to either residential tenants or commercial tenants or both. The county and the governor so far have chosen to adopt protection measures only applicable to residential tenants and only those tenants who can't pay rent due to COVID-19 reasons. So the governor and the county's protections are relatively limited. The Supreme Court, however, issued a rule that does not relate to why you're not paying rent. In fact, it doesn't even relate to non-payment of rent. It says it doesn't matter what kind of a tenant you are, commercial or residential. If you're being evicted, the landlord cannot serve you with a eviction lawsuit to which you must respond. You can stay in your office, you can stay in your restaurant building, you can stay in your apartment, your home, wherever you are as a tenant, be it commercial or residential, without paying rent until 90 days past the time the governor lifts his urgency declaration. So there's right now in place protection for commercial tenants just as there are for residential.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. I was shocked.
All right. Any other questions from council? Seeing none, I'll do the magic clap and open public comment. The public comment is open for 3 minutes. Amy, I'm glad you got your dog back.
Thank you.
Really
The
good.
star of this public comment. The benefit of doing this from outside.
Do we not have public comment that was already sent in for this?
Do we?
I would imagine.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea, Rachel. Let's have that read. Tanya, do we have public comment that was previously submitted? Rebecca? No? Okay.
There's been nothing submitted since the beginning of the meeting for this item or during this public comment time.
So
That's
can people submit public comment like prior to 6 p.m.?
They can, but it is handled in the way that we've always handled public comment prior to the meeting. It gets uploaded to the Civic web, and there's a link in the agenda packet as one of the attachments that they get into that. They get put there where they're viewable, and they get sent to you guys.
Can we have the public comment read in a British accent?
Hello. This is Fred Allenbach.
And now for public comment.
That is what you would like, Amy. I can do that.
Okay, you. Oh, that's pretty good. All right, we're on.
What's this?
You knew.
The meeting just improved by like 40% for me.
That was pretty good, Tanya. That was pretty good. It's like the elegant one. I sound like Cockney. Like.
55 seconds.
All right. Did you get a new dog?
This is not my dog.
Did it
But
just show up at your house?
He's a refugee for at least the next month.
Aw,
That's a cutie.
he's a refugee.
Dogs are weird.
10 seconds.
Trying to find my apples.
That's it.
All right, and we're closing public comment.
I have a comment.
Oh, go ahead. Vice Mayor Henley.
So I find it, I can see why other cities are taking a more wait and see approach. I think that the issue of an eviction moratorium is such an important local issue. And I think that the agency that has the most direct authority to do something like this is a city. And so what I would like to do is something that is almost exactly in line with the county's doing, I guess 90 days like the governor, but I would like for Sonoma to have its own moratorium on both residential and commercial that lasts until 90 days after the governor's emergency, because I think it would not only, it's hard to pay attention with all of the orders and all for the county and the state, and there's still a lot of people locally who don't understand that that applies here. But I think that having something local, people can understand it better, that it definitely applies here, and keeping it sort of in the line and in the spirit of the things that our higher up agencies has done will hopefully make it a little easier for Mr. Walter to put together for us. But for the sake of certainty, and then if something happens along the way and things change course, I mean, we could always adjust ours too. But I think we should do an urgency ordinance doing that.
Other comments from council?
I guess I understand the desire to have a local policy, but practically, excuse me, practically speaking, I don't think it's necessary legally, although I understand the desire to make sure people know. And so I would rather put together maybe like a toolkit or spend the funds we would spend on drafting an ordinance on either contributing to a nonprofit organization like a legal aid organization that does eviction defense, or doing public information about what's already happening, because I don't think that it's legally required, but I do think there is a public information deficit about what your rights are and what is happening. So I think I totally understand the desire to have a local ordinance, but I don't know that it's legally necessary. And I think the funds could be better spent on a public information campaign to help people understand the complicated nature of what the current status of the law is.
Councilmember Henley?
Well, certainly which I forgot the second part to what was my idea. So I think a public campaign is very important, because I've seen, people very recently not realize that they have these protections. But there is a big question mark over whether the county has the authority to do that inside the jurisdictions of cities. I think there's this question mark as to what the effect of the governor's order is going to be after he ends the emergency. And I think that there's going to be questions about whether the judiciary has the authority to do that. But the most certain thing that could happen would be a city doing it for itself. And so there would be zero questions about that. The other part of this that I would like to do within that 90-day tail that's at the end after the governor ends its emergency declaration, I do think that given that perhaps we could get our city prosecutor involved in this, but some sort of like local mediation program to help people work with their landlords to create a path for repayment, because I think it's really hard for people to do themselves. But if we could have something that's kind of third party, and maybe it's bringing in legal aid or something, but it's something that's going to have to come to Sonoma, because a lot of these programs are out of Santa Rosa. But I think that's another way that we could take advantage of this sort of tail at the end, is to actually help people negotiate that.
So,
Harrington?
oh,
go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Madeline.
So Jeff, could you answer that what the Board of Supervisors has proposed or passed? Is that for just unincorporated areas?
No, it's in incorporated and unincorporated. There's an Attorney General's opinion that relies heavily, exclusively actually, on the emergency powers that counties possess under these circumstances. It's a fairly old opinion, but it's pretty clear that in these kind of emergency situations, at least the Attorney General believes that the county can adopt rules that would apply within cities too. And that is the current approach and position that the county has taken. And so far, the other cities in the county have gone along with that.
So what I've just heard, just these latest discussions, the word eviction, but I don't know if that's what we're talking about, still residential or commercial. They're just a general term.
Sounds like both. I think.
Well, what's important here is to understand that there are three different pieces of power being exercised here at the same time, and in combination. We have the court power, we have the governor's executive powers in an emergency, and then the county's power in an emergency. And they've all exercised them in a way that in combination protects both residential and commercial tenants from eviction. And that protection will last for 90 days past the end of the governor's declaration of the emergency. So the question is whether or not the city needs to adopt its own ordinance.
Right.
Certainly worth a discussion. I personally have recommended that we do not need to do that. And that's my recommendation.
So if the county ended its emergency declaration when the state did, would it have the authority to decide whether or not they could have a moratorium on evictions inside of a city?
I would suspect not. But the question becomes then, on what basis would the city be adopting an ordinance that beyond the emergency protects tenants in the fashion that you might be contemplating?
Well, this would just be our general police power. We have public health, safety, police power over us that the county does not share with us. Like it is ours, and it is not the county's.
What is the court's ruling again? That it's 90 days after when can summonses be issued again? How long after?
The court rule reads, a court may not issue a summons on a complaint for unlawful detainer unless the court finds in its discretion and on the record that the action is necessary to protect public health and safety. So there is a public health and safety exception. It goes on to say that this rule will remain in effect until 90 days after the governor declares that the state of emergency related to COVID-19 pandemic is lifted, or until amended or repealed by the Judicial Council.
Councilmember Hunley, are you thinking it should be in place longer than 3 months after, or?
No, I would like to do 90 days. I'm just not confident in the authority that they're exercising to do that.
It sounds like it's the state and county's authority.
Well, this is the court just saying the courts aren't going to be operational. They're not going to process your papers. So whatever your objection to it is, they're not going to hear your matter. So it's like, functionally, if you can't be heard in court, you can't get an eviction.
I don't think they can usually just decide that they don't like something and they're just not going to do it. I mean, here it makes sense, but I just don't understand what they're operating under to even decide what they are and are not going to be enforcing.
I totally agree with you. It does not sound legal to me at all, but if they set their calendar, it's like, well, then they'll just set everything out for 91 days after. It's like, oh, you didn't think that was legal? Fine. In 91 days, we'll find out if it is or not,
I mean, that's the other practical issue, is the question of power and authority and whether it can be done. These are questions that the courts will have to resolve, and the courts are closed. So the likelihood of these being realistic, right. I think, realistic impediments to the efficacy of these protections, in my view, is very low. Because they just won't reach the court in time to affect, I don't think, very many tenants. Now, there may be issues of, for example, of late payment, penalties and interest and the like that tenants will be wanting to have waived. And those certainly will last beyond the declaration of the pandemic urgency.
So, Mr. Mayor, can I jump in?
Yeah.
This is Madeline. I understand what Rachel's saying because having worked with homeless issues, we always get the losing end of everything. And so I understand what you're offering because I don't think we're ever taken into consideration. And so that's one of the reasons I feel the way that I do. I don't know how that is legally or legislatively, but I just feel that we're at the end of everything. We don't really get recognized for anything, especially we're so far away from Santa Rosa and we're small.
I guess the question is, what would be the cost and time spent to draft such an ordinance? How difficult would this be to do?
Well, I guess it depends on what you want in it. If you want me to make a copy of the county's ordinance, it won't take much time at all. If you want to put additional bells and whistles and dates that are different and address penalties and interest and late fees, then it gets more complicated.
Rachel, what were you thinking?
So county is 60 or 90.
60.
So I want something that basically is exactly the county's so that it's very clear and people don't even have to wonder what the differences are. But I think it should be 90 because the governor's is 90.
The governor's does not have 90. It's the
courts.
The
courts, they're 90.
Yep.
Well, could I ask a question then? If something is out there with respect to working on this, could it just be in the event of the county dropping the moratorium? I mean,
could we ratify the counties, like adopt it as our own? And basically we're just pointing to what the county is and saying that it's our law too.
I think we could do that.
That's simple enough.
I think that'd be great. Like if it's some way, I don't know what the right word is, but if it's like republishing the county, so we're confirming it.
That sounds good. And then I really, sorry, Kathy, go.
I just want a little clarity. Would that ratification be done kind of via resolution and then you could change the 60 days to 90, or would it, what does the ratification look like?
Having the council adopt by reference, by incorporation, by reference, the county's ordinance. So it'd be a city ordinance, an urgency ordinance that would take effect immediately. You'd only need to address it one time at one council member meeting, but it would incorporate the county's ordinance as though it were the city's.
And Rachel, you were thinking 60 days because that's the counties and the state doesn't have 90?
Well, I was thinking 90 because of this nice but strange thing that the courts are doing. Well, I guess the first one's only 45 days anyway. The urgency ordinance. I just think if everything is looking like 90, I think the county is probably going to come along and go to 90 days. But if it would be simple to keep it literally exactly what the county has, I would support that too. And I see Rebecca twice.
And then can we also allocate some funds to public information about this?
that's a good idea. I like that.
Yeah, I really like the idea. I like that idea of public information. I think that's really important and having it in layman's terms so people can understand the step-by-step process. And then two, I really love Rachel's idea, though, like I want to understand how much capacity we'd have to do it, of the mediation piece. If we can assist in that in any way, and especially if there was a way that, I mean, ideally we would be able to partner with the county to kind of serve the valley if we could get some kind of fund sharing there, because I know that's a lot, Kathy. That's a lot to ask, but I don't know. That's an underserved population that's going to be dealing with it as much, if not more, as just city residents. So, I mean, when you're looking at undocumented immigrants, are going to be the principal people that are impacted by this, because everybody else gets unemployment and additional money. This is going to be the population that's mostly dealing with the eviction. I mean, everybody's going to be strapped for cash and may have some rental struggles. But if you get unemployed here, you get $600 a week plus state unemployment. It's significant money. If you're undocumented, you get nothing. So.
Yeah, just so in terms of general public info, we could, there are a couple of nonprofits that are already providing some of this, and they may have some pieces they've put together that could be utilized and helped. So the other piece, just remember, I mean, I think this falls straight in the bucket of our Community Resiliency and Support Fund. So that, maybe looking at a piece of that fund to, if you had to, I don't know, do a video or hire someone else, or not hire, or like the mediation, I think we could look at kind of try to articulate what kind of public information and then what the mediation looks like. And that could be another source.
It may be possible if we're doing the exact same thing as the county too, to kind of lean on the county on the public information piece. If our order is literally exactly the same, we can get with their PIO team and try to build something that's simple to understand.
In addition, the city of Santa Rosa's city attorney's been charged with developing a chart or an explanation of the county's ordinance and how it fits within the court rule and the governor's executive order. And that's going to be something that's going to be made public. And I think that would be also a very nice piece of information that we could have on our website, or a link to it.
But I think, like, ideally, we would want to have landlords and tenants involved in a negotiation about a partial payment of rent, because there's no way that after not working for this entire time that people are going to be able to get current on their rent at any time once this is lifted. If you couldn't pay your rent for months, there's no way you're going to pay all that back rent 90 days after it's lifted. So I do think the idea of mediation for partial payment is a great idea, and we should really encourage people to make partial payments and work that out in a formal contract with their landlord so that they're not owing a year's rent when it's all due, or whatever the terms are, that they stay there but don't owe a huge amount of back rent.
And it's clearly something, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, it's something we don't have authority to enforce or require, but offering such services would be really beneficial. And I think landlords are also going to find themselves in situations where, who's going to move in? Everybody's going to be financially strapped. So I think it's not completely equal playing ground. It rarely is in a tenant landlord situation. Sometimes the law, whatever, but I think it's more equal. And I think that's a great idea, Rachel. I think that would be really good if we could do something like that. Kathy, what do you think as far as difficulty in setting something like that up, cost?
Well, I think I don't know enough to give an answer. So I think if we're going to have to come back to council, probably maybe early May with this ratification piece. And then what we could do is also then do a little research and really reach out to a couple of nonprofits that are doing this work and see what that looks like. Odds are maybe they have some program like this that we could leverage versus trying to create our own. So I'd want to do a little legwork. And I think when we bring the ordinance back, we could maybe talk more about it. And, and potentially with, Mayor Harvey and Councilmember Harrington on the sustainability fund, if there is a piece that kind of fits there, we can talk about that as well.
I think also just kind of talking with other cities and with the county to see if we can kind of build a group kind of thing. If we're all under this county ordinance, if it's all the same, that we can kind of build some way to do that. I mean, you could do it over Zoom, right? So if there's some sort of way that we could build that in collaboration, we'd probably get more bang for the buck.
Yeah.
But harder to set that up. But we'll have some time, right?
Yeah, I think there's enough. I mean, there's a lot of good collaboration that are happening between the cities, and there is the Joint Information Center with the county. So again, with everything being the same, I think there is a lot of power and clarity. So I think it's good for us to have some conversations and see how we can maybe work together to put out some good public information so there's clarity for folks that are in this position, and then maybe some assistance on the back end to help them figure out kind of a roadmap out of and a structure for payments.
And in the meantime, if you're listening to this, please donate to Fish's rental assistance program. Been severely impacted, and that can definitely help people right now. But great. I think we've got good direction there, Kathy.
Yeah, it'd be great to have maybe, Jeff, do you want a formal, or do you want us just, so what I'm hearing is we'd be coming back with a ratification of the county ordinance as is, that there's interest from the council to do some PIO and outreach to really provide some clarity about these kind of really what would be 4 different levels, ours, the county, the state, and then the courts. And then third, kind of look at what kind of assistance on the back end for mediation could be provided to help folks figure out kind of a financial plan, hopefully with their landlord, that lets them move out of this situation graciously.
And
Is
I
that the
would,
direction?
yeah. And I would like that service to be available for commercial and regular tenants. I think it's really important.
And I agree with that also.
Thanks, David.
Oh, I guess that raises one point, which, so the county ordinance does not involve commercial, correct, Jeff?
That's correct.
Oh,
Would it be difficult or easy to make it apply to both? Same term.
It's just a matter of crafting some additional findings to make sure that we have some factual basis to support protecting commercial tenants. What public health and safety issues are implicated when you have commercial tenants who are being evicted? We can create some.
Like there's
There
some
are some.
public health and safety issues in there.
Yes.
Well, can we reference the court's order as well about the summonses somehow?
Sure, that can be one of the findings to point to as to why protecting commercial tenants as well as residential is appropriate.
great. Great. Do we need a motion or anything?
No, I think I've got very clear direction.
Beautiful. Awesome. Great. Okay. So we'll close item 5.1 and move on to item, assuming there's no other comments. I assume there's not. We kind of, and we'll move on to item 6.1, city manager comments and announcements.
So just a few brief updates on kind of non-COVID business. First, as council knows, we have our commercial cannabis applications. We received 10 applications. The first, all 10 of them are interested in a retail location. 2 of them are interested in a non-storefront retail location. All 10 went, the first step of the process was to have a paper review by our consultants, HDL company. They have completed that review and all 10 received points of 80% or higher, so all 10 are being moved forward. The next step is to look at to actually do the interview process with HDL and staff, and so we're looking at trying to do those probably via some kind of an electronic process, virtual process, the end of April. So that is moving forward. I would like to request from the council 2 members to work with David Storr, our planning director, and Jeff Welter, our city attorney. If you recall, council, we had a conversation about the cannabis tax measure. You actually provided some kind of broad guidance to us at that point. But it would be, you know, we're at April, it's probably also be good to be looking at what a potential revenue measure for cannabis, and if we're going to put that on to start that process. So we do have a draft from the consultant that we received a couple weeks ago. Have not done any work on that, but again, the original direction we had a couple months from council was to, yes, look at putting something on November, and you did give some general guidance about kind of levels. So it'd be good if there's 2 council members who have interest in being on that subcommittee, then we could work together with staff over the next, say, 45 days and bring something back in probably late May, early June.
You have interest?
Any interest in that?
I will work on this if nobody else wants it.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Anyone else?
I can help.
Okay, thank you, Rachel, and Logan will reach out to you. I don't see a huge amount of work on this, but it'd be good if there are any kind of pieces to chew it through before we bring it back to the full council. So thank you. So we'll create that ad hoc. Our next regular meeting is April 20th, next Monday. The primary item that will be in front of you is the Broadway restriping plan. So that is a request to Caltrans to look at that. The survey results are being compiled, and as soon as we can put those up and out for the public and you, we will do that. The urban growth boundary, we had a council subcommittee that has been working on that. And on that one, we are close to kind of having a draft, kind of another iteration. And then the plan, the committee would like to put it on the public website, get feedback, set a time frame for folks to give any kind of all different stakeholders, because we're in this virtual environment, it makes it a little easier to get feedback that way. And then the committee will take a look at that, and then we'll be coming back to the full council. And then on development code, we do have consultants continuing to work on the development code. The ad hoc has met once or twice. I apologize, I don't know the exact number. And again, we'll be with David Storr now being pulled back out of the county EOC homeless task force. He's picking those pieces up, and we'll be continuing those forward. So
Great.
just a few of council's key initiatives.
I'm sorry, Kathy, does that mean possibly we could do a Zoom meeting with them, or?
Yeah, we'll be doing. Yeah, that will be the plan. So David will be reaching out to you. He's got to first kind of go through some of the work. They've been creating work product. He needs to go through, get caught up, and then he'll be sending that out to the subcommittee. So those are just some of council's key initiatives, and wanted to apprise you in the community that efforts on them are moving forward in addition to the COVID emergency response. So happy to answer any questions.
Questions? All right, seeing none. Council member comments or?
There is no council member comment item on the agenda.
Oh, okay. All right, well, time to adjourn the meeting. Thank you. Sounds good.
Did you
Thank you all.
great meeting, guys?
Bye.